After the death of Joshua, who had led the people of Israel in the conquest of the Promised Land, the nation entered a delicate period in its history. Without a king or a central leadership, the tribes lived scattered, often isolated from one another, and faced constant threats from the surrounding peoples. The era of the judges was marked by a painful cycle. The people turned away from God, suffered oppression from their enemies, cried out for help, and then the Lord would raise up a judge to deliver them. This process repeated itself across generations, revealing a difficult reality for Israel. Political structures were fragmented, justice was almost non-existent, and insecurity was part of daily life. The oppression was not only military, but also social and spiritual. Many times, the people turned to idolatry and abandoned their covenant with God, making their submission to their adversaries even easier. In the northern region of the Promised Land, the city of Hazor, under the rule of King Jabin, represented a great military and political power. Jabin ruled with tyranny, keeping Israel in a state of near slavery. His commander, Sisera, was a feared and cruel leader. With an army equipped with about 900 iron chariots, advanced weapons for that time capable of spreading terror and destruction. He dominated the battlefield. These chariots were like ancient war tanks, heavy and relentless, advancing with overwhelming speed and force. No Israelite tribe was able to unite to face such an overwhelming force. Imagine a people exhausted and terrified, living in dark days where freedom seemed only a distant memory. The sun would rise in the sky, but fear was the permanent shadow over Israel's families. The voices of children would fall silent at the distant echo of the oppressor's war drums. The land that had once been fertile and full of hope seemed to wither under the cruel yoke of the enemy. Israel was prostrated. For 20 years, King Jabin, the ruthless ruler of mighty Hazor, maintained his control with brutality. Sisera, his general, spread terror with his 900 iron chariots, crushing everything in his path. No Israelite tribe had the strength to resist him. The people lived suffocated by oppression, marked by the pain of servitude, the loss of loved ones, the insecurity of harvests, and the anguish of an uncertain future. Where was God? Had the Lord forgotten his people? The songs of celebration seemed distant, worship became rare, and many feared that the covenant had been broken forever. But God never abandons those who seek him. Then in the midst of the darkness, a singular figure arose, a woman whose name would echo through the centuries. Deborah, prophetess, judge, and spokesperson of God, she brought hope and light. Deborah was not an ordinary leader. She did not wear armor, nor did she initially command armies. She sat beneath the shade of a palm tree, which became a symbol of justice and wisdom. In the mountains of Ephraim, people from all regions would come to her, bringing their troubles and doubts, seeking her firm and faith-filled words. She possessed an inexplicable inner strength, a courage that came directly from the Lord. Her calm gaze conveyed peace, but also unshakable determination. Her judgment was respected, her voice was heard, her faith was undeniable. In those difficult times, Deborah was the beacon guiding Israel through the storm. The moment had come. God spoke to Deborah's heart with a voice impossible to ignore. It was time to act, to free the people from that invisible prison. She knew the battle would be difficult, and that she would have to face not only external enemies, but also internal hesitation, especially that of Barak, the man chosen to lead the army. Deborah sent messengers to summon Barak, leader of the tribe of Naphtali, a warrior known for his bravery. He would be responsible for gathering 10,000 men and marching against Sisera. But when he heard the divine call, Barak hesitated. He said, "I will go only if you go with me." It was a request marked by fear and dependency. He knew that facing Sisera was too risky. More than needing warriors, he felt he needed the presence of Deborah, the voice that carried the certainty of God's will. Deborah then answered firmly, I will go with you, but the honor of the victory will not be yours. The enemy will be delivered into the hands of a woman." She knew exactly what she was saying. The prophecy was declared. The mobilization began. The tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun prepared. 10,000 men enlisted, sharpening blades, adjusting shields, and filling water skins. Deborah, confident in the divine promise, went to the battlefield. The confrontation would take place on Mount Tabor, high and strategic, surrounded by open plains. Sisera advanced with his army and his iron chariots gleaming in the sun, ready to crush any resistance. But on that day, God intervened directly. The sky darkened, clouds gathered, and a storm broke out. The rain turned the firm ground into deep mud. The iron chariots, the pride of Sisera's army, became stuck. What had once been strength became weakness, and the God of Israel showed that no weapon forged against his purpose can stand. Confusion overtook the enemy soldiers. Taking advantage of the turmoil, Barak and his warriors advanced boldly, crushing the adversary and cutting off any possibility of escape. Swords gleamed beneath the clouded sky, while the iron chariots that had once been a symbol of fear now became traps stuck in the mud. It was as if all creation had risen alongside Israel, bearing witness that the justice of the Lord had arrived. Victory began to show in the expressions of the people of Israel. A sense of liberation, of justice finally being restored, grew with each step gained in the battle. The war cries that echoed through the valleys began to transform into shouts of hope. Mothers, children, and elders who for years had lived under the weight of oppression could now glimpse a new dawn. With Sisera's army defeated and his might ruined by the storm and the bravery of the Israelites, the Canaanite commander knew his life hung by a thread. His feet sank into the soaked ground as he ran. He abandoned his iron chariots trapped in the mud and fled on foot, desperate, searching for any shelter that might guarantee his survival. His breathing was heavy, sweat burned his eyes, but fear was greater than any physical pain. The powerful commander was now just a man trying to survive. It was then that Sisera came upon a nearby tent belonging to Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite, whose people maintained a tenuous but respected alliance with the Canaanites. Jael, a woman of courage and discernment, received the fugitive with a gentle smile, masked as hospitality. Her eyes, however, carried something the commander could not understand. She offered him rest and a little milk to ease his thirst and exhaustion. Sisera, weary and believing himself safe, lay down and fell asleep, convinced that this would be his final refuge. But Jael had another purpose. She was not merely a hostess, she was a woman aware of the moment and the divine calling. While Sisera slept, his mind still filled with memories of battles won, Jael approached silently. When the commander fell into a deep sleep, she took a tent peg and, with a determination that seemed sent from heaven, drove it through his head, taking his life instantly. It was not merely an act of courage, but a declaration that God did not need mighty armies to defeat his enemies. He could use simple hands, the hands of an apparently ordinary woman, to accomplish his purposes. The death of Sisera was the undeniable sign that Jabin's tyranny had come to an end. The people of Israel, now led by Deborah and Barak, could finally breathe in relief and feel hope reborn in their hearts. Children once again ran along the roads. The elderly sat at the city gates to talk, and women lit their lamps with a new brightness in their eyes. The oppression that once dominated the land had been shattered. Deborah then raised her voice in a song, an ancient poem that echoes to this day as a testimony of divine intervention. In this hymn, she celebrates the bravery of Jael and of herself, the strength of the warriors who trusted in the Lord, and the judgment that God executed upon their oppressors. It was a song that transcended time, a melody carrying memories of tears, sweat, and faith. She exalted the power of the Most High, who caused rivers to move and mountains to tremble, helping Israel achieve victory. After that battle, the nation lived in peace for 40 years. Decades of freedom, justice, and the assurance that God does not abandon his own. After the conflict, Deborah and Barak did not merely celebrate, they sang. It was a profound song of faith, gratitude, and acknowledgement of the mighty hand of God in history. This song, recorded in Judges 5, is one of the oldest known Hebrew poems and carries extraordinary weight. It is not merely a military celebration. It is a living prayer, a testimony of how trust in God transformed the destiny of Israel. Deborah exalts divine justice and the intervention of the Lord, who caused nature itself to move in favor of his people. She highlights the tribes that rose up with courage and mentions those who hesitated, showing that in both physical and spiritual battles, what matters is the disposition of the heart. Among the praises to the warriors, she emphasizes the strength of women. Jael, with courage and cunning, defeated Sisera. Her action is compared to a storm coming from the desert, revealing the hidden power in feminine determination. The death of Sisera was not only the end of a conflict, it was a turning point for Israel. For 40 years, the people enjoyed peace, a precious time in the turbulent era of the judges. Deborah became a symbol of leadership guided by faith, wisdom, and courage. In a society marked by patriarchy, she proved that God can use anyone, man or woman, to accomplish great works. Her story continues to inspire generations, showing that true leadership is born from a heart obedient and confident in the Lord. When Jael drove the peg into Sisera's head, silence filled the tent. The enemy who had spread terror for years was gone, struck down by the courage of a woman. The news spread quickly like fire across dry fields. The people of Israel could hardly believe it. Sisera, the feared commander of the iron chariots, was no more. A collective sigh of relief swept the nation. The shadow of oppression began to fade, replaced by the sweet fragrance of freedom. Men who once hid in fear lifted their heads. Women who had wept quietly felt a new strength emerge. Deborah, the prophetess who had guided Israel by faith, walked among the people with her face shining with the certainty of the fulfilled promise. She knew that this victory was more than a military triumph. It was the beginning of a new era. For 4 decades, Israel lived in peace. Tribes once divided were strengthened once again. Homes were rebuilt, fields cultivated, and above all, faith was restored. Barak, who had once hesitated, was now seen as a leader transformed by trust in God. And the people learned that true strength arises from unity, firm faith, and the courage to act. When the dust of war finally settled, Deborah raised her voice. It was not an ordinary voice. It was the voice of a delivered people, the voice of faith overcoming fear, the voice of hope that endures. And she sang, and her song crossed generations. In her words, she exalted the Lord, the God who made the earth tremble, who opened rivers and moved mountains to rescue his people. She recalled that victory had not come from human strength, but from the powerful action of the Almighty. It was as though each sentence were a flame lit in Israel's memory, rekindling the certainty that God never forgets those who cry out for help. Deborah called the tribes to remember, those who rose and fought with bravery, and also those who remained undecided, watching from a distance. Her song did not hide the truth. There were those who risked themselves in faith, and there were those who hesitated out of fear. But her song was not one of condemnation, it was one of wisdom, a call so that in the future battles of life, no one would remain neutral when God calls them to act. She honored the valor of Israel's warriors, but also highlighted the essential role of women like Jael, who displayed courage in the decisive moment. She reminded the people that deliverance did not come only through soldiers' swords, but also through the steady hands of a woman who, guided by discernment, confronted the oppressor in the silence of her own tent. Each verse was like a wave of gratitude, a living testimony of God's faithfulness in the midst of battle. Her song echoed across the fields, filling the air with joy and praise, uniting the people in a celebration that was not merely of military victory, but of the triumph of faith, justice, and divine love. And in that song, Israel recognized itself as a renewed people, called to walk in the light of righteousness and trust in the Lord. The fear that once dominated the nation's heart dispersed like mist before the sun. Hope once again became a daily companion, and faith claimed the place where anguish had been. Deborah, prophetess and judge, became the living voice of hope, an eternal reminder that even in the darkest moments, God remains faithful and his power is undeniable. She was like a torch burning in the night, lighting the path of a people weary and wounded, yet not defeated. The story of Deborah is one of the most striking and inspiring in the scriptures, offering deep lessons about leadership, faith, courage, and justice. She lived in a time of great distress when Israel suffered under the severe oppression of its enemies. Even so, Deborah did not allow herself to be ruled by fear or circumstances. Her posture was firm, her mind steady, and her heart warmed by the presence of God. As judge and prophetess, her leadership was marked by wisdom and commitment to what was just, showing that leadership is not a matter of brute force, but of serving with integrity and seeking the common good. She taught that true authority is born when the heart bows before the Lord. Her courage shone like light in the midst of darkness, revealing that true strength arises from faith in the Lord. It was this faith that moved her voice, her decisions, and her words. Deborah did not speak for herself. She spoke under divine direction. Deborah faced a social context that restricted the role of women, yet this did not prevent her from becoming a decisive leader and a steady voice for Israel. She teaches us that God can use anyone, regardless of gender or social position, to accomplish great things when there is willingness and trust. A defining characteristic of her life was her constant attentiveness to the voice of God. As a prophetess, she did not make decisions on her own. She sought divine guidance to lead the people with justice and discernment. This reminds us of the importance of seeking God's direction, especially in times of crisis or decision. Moreover, Deborah shows us that true faith leads to action. She did not wait passively for deliverance. She summoned Barak and the people to fight, acting with courage even in the face of uncertainty. For her, faith was not merely belief, it was movement. Her story is a call for us to be instruments of transformation, rising to act according to the will of God. Deborah's legacy is great. Her song of triumph, one of the oldest poetic expressions in the Bible, celebrates the faithfulness of God and inspires generations to recognize his mighty hand in life. Battles. She shows us that leadership rooted in faith brings not only victory, but peace and restoration to the people, a peace that permeates the soul and builds the future. Even after years of oppression, Deborah remained firm in hope. Her life teaches us to persevere, to trust God even when the struggle seems to last long. That trust in the Lord's covenant is the source of the people's true strength, and must be ours as well. Deborah also challenges us to break cultural barriers that attempt to limit human potential. Her example as a female leader and prophetess opens the way for a broader understanding of dignity, respect, and the value of women in any context. She reminds us also of the importance of humility in leadership. Despite her prominent role, she always directed the glory to the Lord, recognizing him as the source of all victory and wisdom. Unity and shared effort were essential in her leadership. Deborah knew that great achievements are born of collaboration and shared faith, teaching us that no one succeeds alone. Her life was a beacon in a time of darkness, an invitation to be light where we are, defending justice and acting with courage even in the face of challenges. Deborah also shows us that fear is natural, but must not dominate us. Faith transforms fear into action and doubt into firm resolve. Her song of victory is a hymn of praise that inspires us to recognize God's work in our journey, celebrating His victories even in the midst of struggles. In the end, Deborah's life is a call to active faith. It is not enough to believe, one must act, facing the world with courage, knowing that God is with us. In summary, Deborah remains a lasting example of faith, courage, and justice. Her story challenges us to live with purpose and confidence, remembering that with God at our side, we are able to overcome any obstacle and transform the reality around us. If you enjoyed this video, like it and share it with your family and friends. Help us spread the word of God to more people. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any story from the Holy Bible. Click the card that appears on your screen and watch our next video. God bless you.